Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Ocalian Nights Live. My name is Greg. I am one of our part-time dungeon masters here. I'm joined this evening by Ryan Mace and David Lugo for a little bit of a Dungeon Masters discussion. We're going to start off discussing a little bit of our experience before we go forward. My name is Greg. I have now had the honor and the privilege of Dungeon Master for 2 one-shots here for the Ocalian Nights.
So fun.
The Monster Squad Epic one-shot, which was, I think we'll get into a little bit more, one of my all-time favorite experiences I've ever had as a Dungeon Master. And then our most recent Ocalian Nights, what was it, Light Up Ocalia?
Sure.
Christmas
Holly
special
Jolly
that we had.
Fest.
Which turned into absolutely something magical, I think, and was a wonderful time. I'm joined this evening by our primary Dungeon Master, David Lugo. David?
Yeah, hi guys. Thank you guys for tuning in and for checking out this kind of Dungeon Master talk. We're really excited about it. But I have been Dungeon Mastering for about 10 years now, maybe a little bit longer. I actually got into Dungeons and Dragons. And then after my first time as a player, jumped into the role of the Dungeon Master. So I don't find myself on the opposite side of the table very often, but when I do, I'm lucky enough to have awesome DMs like Mr. Greg and Mr. Ryan Mace. 2 absolutely fantastic Dungeon Masters who have different philosophies and methodologies to how they run their games, which just, I think, add so much fun to each time you get to be a player in one of their games. So that's super fun. And then that's kind of my side of the story.
Ryan Mace.
Look, he's only saying those nice things because he hasn't played yet.
Your experience, and then actually we'll kind of kick off my questions that I have for the both of you. Ryan Mace, your experience as a Dungeon Master, and how would you describe your style as a Dungeon Master?
So I'm going to be super terrible with it and go, so it's like Dark Souls? I like
accurate.
I like to make you feel pain. If you don't leave needing a therapist, you haven't really. I haven't done my job properly.
This is a great time to bring up that tomorrow night on the Ocalian Nights channel will be Ryan Mace's premiere as a Dungeon Master on this channel. So way to like tease that one out.
Definitely
really
come
good.
check it out. Watch him kill a bunch of players.
Darian and I have already opted out of that one, just so everybody knows. We need to take a little break, and all of a sudden I'm like, man, that was a good night to take a break.
If it's a TPK, I wouldn't be surprised. I've definitely planned for that outcome, as in the stream will end early.
Sure, I'm going to do everything in my power.
Just so everybody knows, is a total party kill. David, before we get into your style, have you ever had a total party kill? Have you ever done that to a party?
I have done a total. I've had several total party kills, but they are absolutely every single one of them was based on terrible decisions, one after another.
Terrible
which
decisions
led
and
them,
dice rolls, or just terrible decisions?
Terrible decisions and dice. Yeah, you got a couple of the dice rolls in there, because that's definitely it. Is you making a decision that your character, doesn't do well, and then being forced to have that roll happen. And if it doesn't go your way, man, like there's nothing that I can do about this, especially once the scene is set.
As David Lugo says, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
While he laughs and says it. It's my favorite thing in the world.
So what is your DM style there? You total party kills, which
Sure.
which
Yep.
transition to me nicely, but what is your style of Dungeon Master?
So, I believe that I am the biggest, as the Dungeon Master, I'm the biggest fan of the party. So I am like the herald for this awesome party of adventurers who gets to retell their story kind of Witcher style, and just have that person who takes in the situation and then regurgitates the best outcome. That is what I want to happen in all of the games that I'm a part of, is I want to see you guys do the coolest things possible. And I think my DM style leans to that, so you'll find yourself getting weird rolls that shouldn't be there, and cool monsters that do some fun stuff.
From my own experience with David's DM style, which I think you do an awesome job, and I can't wait to see you, Ryan, on like how you're going to do like the Dark Souls game. But my experience with you, David, for the first time in my life, I ever had the 3rd death roll. For anyone who watches our regular campaign, Cricket Whittler legitimately almost died. He was down to his last death save roll. for the first time ever in my experience, I've been playing D&D for like 4 years now. My first ever death roll was at your hands.
Wow.
And it was at the same time the most terrifying but exhilarating experience of my life. Because it was me and Ben Bauer at the same time.
Sure.
We're like, all of a sudden you're like, oh,
this matters.
I don't think
Like,
you
this
realize
role
what
matters so
you're doing.
much.
You're just like, and I was like, oh my God. And I saw, it was like I remember it, it's like a flash moment. It was a 12 that came up. And I'm
Sure.
like, oh, Cricket lives. Because in a short period of time, I've become attached to Cricket.
Heck yeah, man.
I've changed my Instagram handle to Cricket's Whittler now.
Wow.
I'm back on the gram.
That's dope.
But that specific moment is the first time I've ever had a dice roll. But I didn't feel at the time you were being too sadistic to us.
Sure.
Why, Why do you look at me like that? I want you to live. I want you to live. I just,
You just wanted to appreciate it.
You got David clip this section where he says he wants us to live.
And just
It's
drop
gonna
that
come
into
out.
Context. I want you to live by making smart decisions.
Okay.
If you make a terrible tactical choice,
Sure.
get fucked.
Yep, I get it. I
It's
get
on
it.
you, bro.
I get it.
Don't fight 40
which
bandits.
I get it.
Which will bring me to like my style. I am like king collaborative storyteller.
Sure.
I just like everybody to sit around the table and have a good time, and we all tell a good story. And this is like I think something which we can probably discuss a little bit more, which is, are you more of a planner or not? Like I'm a less is more like planner. Like when we did the Ocalian Nights one shot, I think like this right here, that is the extent of my prep.
No.
Where I'm just like, kind of like, we're going to sit down at the table and we're all going to figure this out together. And I'm very fast and free with the loot. Fast and loose with the
taking
rules.
Notes to playing the game.
You crazy.
Improv entirely.
And that's one of my things. So I've been a dungeon master since like 2018. Since I started playing officially in 2017, and then eventually, you get so addicted to it. I'm sure you have the same experience where you're like, I want to play D&D, but I can't find a dungeon master. So it looks like I'm going to have to be a dungeon master. So, and you kind of get thrust into that role, as terrifying as it is at first. So when you guys are doing the dungeon master, and I've been DM'd since 2017. I barely know the rules still.
Sure.
I'm terrible
There's
about
so many.
that.
Did you say
There's so many.
2017?
Yeah.
High five, bro.
Yeah,
Same.
2017 squad.
Yeah.
But and I am so terrible. We're still to these days where I'm like, all right, what am I rolling on that for? Like spell casting. I have a notepad on my dungeon master screen about spell casting.
Sure.
What ability you're using and everything, and then still every time I'm like, what am I rolling?
Yeah. No,
So
for sure.
so Ryan, you are more of so you're the sadist. So to be the sadist, you got to know the rules and everything. Are you more prep and know the rules backwards and forwards?
Anytime I don't know a rule, I look it up,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have it memorized like the most
like a machine. It's
like
pretty cool.
like an autist. I remember it for eternity.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I used to plan out my sessions, and then they would never go according to plan, so I'd have to change them. So instead, I developed my entire strategy around reacting to whatever the players did, and then I'd have cliff notes only in my head. I would never write them down, of what I thought would happen, and I would make stat blocks for enemies that I want to use, and then I would use them when times came up.
Sure.
Right. So, David, do you have a group of monsters that you have ready, or do you
Spiders.
have
Spiders,
I know
always
when
spiders.
I DM my wife asked me about this a lot. She's like, so when you go into a dungeon master, I'm like, I know the themes I want them to hit.
Sure.
I know the things I want to happen. As to how they get there, so how do you prepare for that? Because and there are plenty of memes out there. Your players are going to find the most convoluted way possible. Where the puzzle is turn this, there's a clock above it. You got to turn it clockwise, and
they're chiseling they're chiseling a clock on the floor. Where did you even get that from?
So what's your prep for? So what's your prep look like?
Yeah.
And what do you expect out of your players?
So I like to do an ABC possibilities. I do a lot of prep, a crap ton of prep. So I do an ABC. I do what I think the group will do. I do what I would like to happen in the ideal scenario, and then I do the C is kind of broken up into, if they don't take that original idea, these are some of the avenues they might go. And then I take into consideration where they might be, and then I go and look up monsters that might live in that area, and then pick the ones that I think would be the most fun for them to encounter at that time. And then taking into consideration the party's capabilities, I make the monsters either favor their pluses or really go against their pluses. So that way, if I want it to be a more challenging encounter, I'll throw things at them that I know will hurt their charisma characters or their wisdom characters. Lots and lots of prep though.
Wow. So do you use a tool? So do you use tools for anything? Like I know there's Kobold Fight Club out there.
Sure.
And D&D Beyond has the tools and everything. Or are you just kind of like, we have this amount of people and you look up the CR rating in there and like kind of build around that? Or
Not
are you
quite.
just like the world that we're living in right now? Like we're fighting snake boys right now.
Yeah.
So many snake boys.
So many snakes. Yeah, it's a lot of snake boys. A lot of snake boys. It's the army though. It's that their army is comprised of snake boys.
Mm-hmm. So are you like kind of just like, yeah, that should be about right, and we'll see how this plays out?
Yep.
Because I got to tell you, eventually the players win.
Yeah.
When you're not Ryan Mace doing sadistic things.
I don't know
More
what.
than likely.
So okay, hold on. Let me make some clarification.
Speaking of
My-
having lots of things to
My
fight.
players always win.
Okay.
They don't. It just is very hard. And when they're done, they're like, "Oh, thank God we won." All right. I'm not actively rooting for them to lose. I want them to win.
This is the big hype cast for tomorrow's one shot.
Oh,
I'm
I can't
telling you,
legit.
Ryan,
No
it is
joke.
the-
I legitimately
I
want you to
can't
win.
wait to see this. Whatever me and Darian's plans are for tomorrow
Yep.
night just got changed. We're gonna be live. We're gonna be like our plans for tomorrow night are now probably watching popcorn and watching the live stream to see what you're
Nice.
gonna do to these guys.
Like when you're dealing with my campaign, if you're in a social interaction, I am actively looking for you to mess up your speech pattern.
Sure.
I have literally gaslit people in the game and changed used their words against them.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was an interaction, brand new player, it was first time playing. Mm-hmm. He admitted to deception that the party was trying to do,
Nice.
and I had the
Get
NPC
worked.
call him out on it.
Get worked.
And then he had mentioned one of the elements of it that was in the room with him, and the guy called him out on it.
Oh my God.
And he was like, "What just happened? What just happened?" He was like, "Can you turn around? You're under arrest."
Heck yeah.
Oh my! So, and you know, that's a really interesting discussion, which is what are your views on table talk? Which for people, table talk is where like there are some games like where you look at like the big professional games like the D&D streams or Critical Role or something. They don't table talk at all. You're at the table. You're completely in character. And it all goes back to like the DM style, which, you know, the Dungeon Master is pretty much a referee.
Sure.
And I know I personally, like, I am like, table talk it up, because like my group, we call ourselves a snack group.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
we pretty much like talk about movies and eating snacks as much as we play. And I honestly like it where they do table talk and they can kind of strategize and they put
Sure.
this big, beautiful scene together. But then there's like, at the other point, I have like a timer in my head where I'm like, if they're
Yep.
table talking too much, I start to make things happen. Like they're figuring out, and like all of a sudden arrows start flying
Yeah,
off.
absolutely.
So David, where do you play it with?
So it 100% depends on the players playing in the game. If I have a bunch of like min-maxers is when you are building a character for the specifics to have your least skills be the ones that you are never going to use, and your maximized skills going to be the ones you rely on the entire game. And that's opposed to creating a balanced character that has pluses and minuses. So that's min-maxing. But if I have a group of min-maxers, that's awesome. They're going to have a lot of fun because I'm going to force more challenging things like no table talking whatsoever. You have 11 words that you're able to say in your 6 seconds. Anything over that 11 is going to eat into your movement, one of your bonus actions, or your action. But if I have a group of people who is a snack group with a D&D addiction, as I've heard you call it, I absolutely believe that them having the fun of planning out the activity, letting each other know that, hey, you can come heal me when you get a second because you have this as your ability.
By the way, that Power World, whatever the bonus action heal is. Like,
Exactly.
I don't know what you're talking about. Don't look at me. It's a 1d4 plus your spellcaster bonus.
Sure enough. And that'll really depend when I make that switch, because I'll start off with there being as a lot of table talk's okay. And then there'll be a point where we get some rules lawyering happening on the PC side or the NPC side. NPC will decide to do something, and somebody's like, hey, man, they can't do that because of this. I'm like, all right, great. Now that we've set a precedent on things need to be done in a certain order, we will have that order take place now. From now on going forward, this is the way that it's operated.
Ryan Mace, your feelings on Dungeon Master as referee, and where do you draw the line on table talk or like so. I guess it always comes down to combat, which happens to be like one of my least favorite parts of D&D.
Sure.
Because like I said, I play very loose with the rules, and we'll get into this a little bit more. But like so, like you're the referee when you're the dungeon master, which like most people comes down to. Do you have a problem with that with your players, where you're just like, because you get like you two have some of the best. And I'm so glad we clipped that one. We will put the clip right here of our discussion about sneak attacks, and it was pretty much whatever discussion these two had about it. And it's one of the best things. So like, where do you draw? Because you have the best discussions on it. So Ryan, where do you draw that line where you're like, I'm the referee, like I'm the DM. This is how it is.
I go into any situation where I'm the DM and I say my word is final. If I make a decision on it, that's what's happening. You can try and convince me, but if I say no, that's the end of it.
Right.
Because I've already thought this out far enough. Especially because I am probably one of the most lenient DMs you'll ever have. You know this is true. Don't look at me like that.
Trousers David is just smiling.
I give my players so much because I want them to have the most fun and most unique characters that they can have, because I want them to play the character that they want to play, not entirely be restricted by the rules.
Yeah.
Like if you want to do something fun and cool, I'm totally fine with that. If you can justify to me how you're doing it, I'm like totally okay with it.
Especially when the rules make it happen. Two great examples of that, the Monster Squad, which is going to bring us back to another discussion later, which was the Monster Squad where you two did the cool thing, and then when we had the one where Brian, was it playing the Leonid?
Yeah, Rob,
Chris playing the Leonid, where he was like, do you play Rule of Cool? And like your face just lit up. You're like, yeah.
We do.
And he's like, can I do this, 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 and this? And everyone at the table's like, do it. And then he failed it. And I slapped out that inspiration because I'm like, I want that to happen.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I don't care about fall rules or anything.
Sure.
So.
And that really did help. He ended up rolling really high, and his cool thing, which was totally not in-game possible. But Rule of Cool, you want to do something awesome, and the dice say you can. Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
And I think that, and this is something, and it brings me back to, and this is something I really want to bring up. When you are the dungeon master, and there's a certain, I want to know if there's either, and I want you both to bring up, if there was a specific point where something happened to you where you knew you could be a DM, or if there's like a specific moment that you remember. Because I always feel like, I know when I've had a good session.
Sure.
You know when you've had a good session as a dungeon master. I'm curious about your input if you know where I'm talking about, where something happens during the session where you're just like, nailed it.
Yep.
You're like, I did this now. Like, I know everybody at this table is sold, and there's like certain moments and certain things where you do as a dungeon master. And I don't think you've never DM'd. You can never know what it's like until you have DM, where all of a sudden you know you nailed the session.
Sure.
And for the Monster Squad session, for me, it was when you two did the thing, which we'll throw highlights to it here.
Nice.
When you two did the thing when Bubbles was hanging over the Hydra's mouth. And then like you two did the cool combo thing where you rolled over and you grabbed Bubbles and you two had to do the rolls, and then you nailed the rolls and you two were like giving high fives and everyone was yelling. I was like, that's it. I've nailed this session. Because I was terrified going into that session because I'd never DM'd for y'all before. You're pretty much so, which is like new strangers for me. But like I knew at that moment, I'm like, I have nailed this session.
Heck yeah.
And Ryan, do you have any specific moments you remember where you're like, I can do this?
I have two really good ones. I made one player cry in the session.
Like, good cry or bad cry?
Oh, he was heartbroken.
No.
Yeah. It was his character died the previous session to one of the other players because they walked into a succubus's lair and didn't listen to me when I said, "Are you sure you want to go fight the succubus without a long rest while missing half your party?" And they said yes. Succubus charmed one of the players. Then they got into a 1v1, and the one died. Then the next session, he came in as his previous character's husband and visited the grave site on the hill that was reminiscent of Iroh's son from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And while they were mourning the loss of the character, I had the new villain of the campaign puppeteer his character's former body and then mockingly said, like, lovey-dovey stuff to the character. And the player started I'm so sorry, Nick. I love you, man. But he was crying. He was like, I hate you so much right now. And I was like, I hate myself, but my God, this is good. And then the next one was I did a solo session for a player, which was for the one who killed the friend, that character had so much trauma from killing their friend that they left the party, and he made a new character, and we did like a solo session with that one. And it was 5 hours of me making that character deal with their psychological issues, family issues, and everything. And by the time we were done, he was like, I didn't realize how much therapy you could get from D&D. He was like, I felt like my character and that I was being healed by the process.
Oh, that's awesome.
David, your favorite moments, or like was it when you knew you could DM an original experience, or do you just have like specific memories of DMing?
When I knew I could be a DM and that I would make not better decisions, but decisions that the players playing in the game would have more fun with. It was actually my very first time playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was in Orlando, Florida, at a Coliseum of Comics. And
we've all been there if you lived in Orlando.
Definitely.
Okay, the Coliseum of Comics used to be Enterprise 1701 back in the day.
I don't know.
Man, you got to dig deep. That's an Orlando deep cut right there. A Central Florida deep cut right there.
Nice. And I'm playing with, I decide to be an ongoing character now that his name is Tynes Crunk, and he's a half-orc, super dumb. The backstory a little bit is he was lost in the wilderness at a very young age and never really grew to know different people. He was found by this fairy druid, and he fell in love with her because she like took care of him. And then every time I tried to interact with the party or interact with any NPCs, or if I was raging, no one in the group could understand me, is a rule the DM made. And like I was like this, like because he was like, yeah, you were in the wilderness, you have no ability to communicate. And I was like, that's not what I intended when I built this character. So I was just like, man, I would do this different.
Would you say that that's anti-fun?
I would absolutely say that that is anti-fun. And I thought that there was so much other ways that could be played out, man. And that's when, during that moment, I was like, man, I would do this different, I would do this different, I would do this different. I was like, why don't you just start becoming a DM, David? Why don't you just read all the books, or as many as you can get your hands on, and start DMing?
What version was that?
This was 3.5.
Oh, it was 3.5.
This was 3.5. So I don't, like, now that I'm, 5e is here, and I see the major differences between 3.5 and 5, like, maybe that was a real thing that DM couldn't put on a character.
Right.
Because it was supposed to be a lot harder, and the choices you make in your character creation really have an effect on your ability to influence the world around you.
But still, your job as a DM is to, like, make sure that everyone, or, like, I feel my job as a DM is, like, everyone at my table should be having a good time, which I think is something all three of us have definitely done a good job of being like. And I was kind of curious about it because there's a lot of people, and you brought it up in the Min-Maxers, where they look at Dungeons and Dragons as a game to be won. Rather than, and I think that's what's become evident in like everyone watching Dungeons and Dragons these days. It's a collaborative storytelling experience, and that's always how I've heard it described, compared to game to be won. And I think that's kind of like what got you into it, which was you're like, well, I can make this much more funner for this group of people. And then, you kind of get to be the center of the experience, which is the whole thing.
I struggle with taking center stage when I'm a player. I definitely felt it last session, especially afterwards. I was like, damn, that was rude.
But then again, when you're in character, which I think is one of the best things, and all right, real quick, I'm going to tell one story, then I have another question about what it's then like being on the other side of the screen. But like, I remember my moment where I knew I could DM. I originally started playing Dungeons and Dragons. My buddy Mark brought me to play Jordan and everybody's game, and I tell you what, I warn David, when you have to DM for these people, they are ruthless.
I can't wait.
They are ruthless people, and they will challenge every bit of dungeon mastering about it. And like, it's where I originally like started playing with these guys.
Good place to catch your teeth.
Like, so I'm like, I eventually started dungeon mastering, and I went back and I like ran a campaign for them, and we had this one moment where like I actually, unbeknownst to them, they were in like a mind flayer, like insane asylum, but they were all like living in their dream world. And unbeknownst to them, I had actually advanced the timeline 10 years.
Dope.
So my buddy Brandon was playing he was a fan of tomatoes, and he always handed people tomatoes. And like, so in his dream world, he was like raising these tomatoes, and you know how it's always good to end a session on a cliffhanger.
Sure.
They walk into a room, and up walks this child and grabs Ringo Ragu and goes, "Daddy!" And then the look on my buddy Brandon's face, his jaw hit the table, and I was just like,
"Yep, I've won.
Still
This is it."
Day, I remember that as like one of my all-time favorite memories. I'm like, and I even like ever since I've like been addicted to being the dungeon master.
Sure.
So like bringing us to our next subject, you end up getting pigeonholed into the dungeon master role because not everyone wants to do it. And now, David, that you've had to be on the side of the table.
Yeah.
Like I noticed you especially, like when we did the Monster Squad thing, you were sitting over there like.
You want to hear a great story about being on the other side of the table?
All right, we'll start with you, Ron Mace. You seem real excited about this.
I love this story because it's awesome. So we were playing and we were in Averness, and we.
Averness.
Yeah,
Averness.
whatever. Averness.
Averness is in Ocalian Nights.
Yeah. And Loper, we were in the fucking War Machines, and Loper steals the fucking soul coins from the driver.
Oh, such a good moment.
David has the driver stop the car and turn the ignition off. And I look at him, no one else catches this, and I just go, "You fucking son of a bitch!"
Yep. It was literally, the coolest thing, man. Loper had like struck a pretend friendship with the guy driving. So he's up in the front cab.
Are you DMing?
Yeah, I'm DMing at the time. Ryan, this was one of the first games Ryan had played on the other side, really coming into play as a player for once, like, I don't know. This is one of our very first times playing together.
It's like the third session we ever played.
And Loper, who you guys know as Derp, he struck a friendship and was lying the entire time, and I kept making him roll deception checks. He decides that he wants to use a stealth roll. He rolled really high, and he wants to grab with sleight of hand, and the sleight of hand roll was really good to steal all the soul coins from this guy. So Loper now has them in his hand. He leaves. He climbs through the back door, and then I have the PC like the vehicle came to a stop. And then, because the soul energy had ran out, is the way that I kind of pitched that to go.
Oh, yeah.
So the vehicle comes to a stop abruptly, and Ryan goes, "You son of a bitch!" And I was like, and then he goes to start the vehicle again, and he can't find his coins.
I knew exactly what he was doing. As soon as he said, I stopped the car. I was like, "Fuck!"
So it's because was it something that you knew you would have pulled?
It's exactly what it's the exact manipulative shit that the players don't catch, but because I do the exact same thing, I was like, "Motherfuckers!" No, and then everyone looked at me like, "What did you do? What did you do?" I'm like, "I can't tell you because my character didn't see it."
So David, you're on the other side of the table.
Yes.
So what's it been like for you having to sit on the other side of the table as someone that DMs most of the time?
I mean, I absolutely think it is a super fun game, man, and that's the way I like to think about D&D as from the player's perspective. It's more of a game. The DM has created like a side scroller in my mind, and it's up to me to make the best out as the player to come up with the best solutions for these different problems that pop up. So I had an absolute blast in your one shot. Being able to focus in and really drill down one person in a game was very, very cool and super rewarding. I get these little moments as a DM with each player. But to be able to have that relationship with Ryan and be brothers and have this super quick made up backstory that linked us in together for years. Like we created a 5-minute backstory that literally put us at kids fighting over the ocean. And
it was like Loki and Thor. It was legit.
Bro, it was
think
super
about it.
cool, man.
I definitely had the Loki and Thor feeling off you too. Yeah.
So that was super fun, and then being able to really drill down on what a character can do. As I literally, man, outside of seeing NPCs and different monster stat blocks, I don't go and dive into your guys' character sheets and really say, this is what your action economy looks like. You view that differently as a player, I've noticed. noticed.
Especially like spell slots and everything. Yeah.
Paying
Where
a
you're
lot
like,
more
how many
attention,
actions
man.
you can
That
use.
is,
Sure
that
enough.
is exactly where we completely differ. I know my players' character sheets back and
Sure.
forth
Really,
better.
huh?
I know your character, you and E's character sheet. I know better than you guys do. I swear.
Probably.
Yep. No doubt, man.
Because-
no doubt.
Well, I'll tell you what. Since we got to go back to like 1,
Yeah.
like with bringing me like since we went back to 1 and now that we're moving them forward compared to the thing that I ran. So let me go ahead. My other side of the table, my
Sure.
perspective
Yes,
on
yes.
this is I'm at an art show here in the power plant and I meet David Lugo and for some reason Dungeons and Dragons come up and he's like, let me introduce you to this Ryan guy. He has a D&D studio upstairs. I'm like, sure. Upstairs we're in a D&D studio. Cut forward 2 weeks and he's like, hey man, we're going to play D&D tonight. We might or might not record. Do you and Darian want to come? I'm like, sure, sounds great. Whipped up a couple of level 3 characters. Next thing you know, I'm sitting on the other side of the table with a bunch of strangers.
Sure.
And like it had been my first time playing in at least 2 years.
Wow.
And like especially with a character that I barely know, Darian's only played a couple of times, very loose with my rules and everything. We don't know it. And I think so like me being on the other side of the table, I noticed what was weird at first for me was like, wow, I'm not the center of attention at this game. Like I'm not running this, and that was weird. But then all of a sudden like I got to like get into my character. And I think this like kind of segues us into our next point here.
Sure.
Is what's amazing to listening to you talk about it and to you talk about it is these stories are real.
Yeah.
And like
legit.
so we had that first game and we
So
played
cool.
that session. We played that first session, which you can watch here. We played that first
Poor
session
David.
and
Poor
I'd never played with y'all before. I met you for like 5 minutes. I met you for like 5 minutes. I'd never met Sully. I had never met Loper. And we sat down and we played this game. And we walked out like a couple hours later.
Sure.
Just like the 5 of us, 6 of us had just been on an adventure.
Yeah.
And that adventure was real. And I know one of your first experiences with my wife was her pulling a kazoo out of nowhere to wake up Mark Kith. And it's like, but like, and like 2 weeks later, and, you know, like all of us have still barely hung out, but we have had like real experiences
Sure.
together. My snack group, we've defeated Tiamat together. We've been
Huge.
into Averness and back together. So Ryan, speak to that a little bit on like so these memories that you have. Like I know I play them all out in my mind. These memories are real experiences that people have together.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it was really funny talking to David Cox, not you,
Sure. Not me.
and
Producer
Sully
David.
because they thought that everyone in the room except for them had known each other for years.
Really?
Years.
Really?
And it was a total shock to everybody to find
Uh-huh.
out that no, everyone has had minimum interact with each other, and that everything was thrown together last second because I wanted to record it and make it better than what it could have been, because it was supposed to just be a casual game at first.
Yeah, like you were like, we might or might not record. Next thing you know, you're like, all right, we're going live. There's cameras.
Yep.
Like everything is happening and everything. And then David, you pull off this experience. So now all of a sudden you're the dungeon master of the Ocalian Knights. And like, so you're DMing for like 5 basic strangers at the time.
Sure.
And then like, so now that we've had all these experiences, what's that been like for you, like over the past couple
Oh man,
years?
it's been incredible, man. I have been lucky enough to have some elongated campaigns that have gone 3-4 months consistent, but I've never had a group of players this involved in not only the story but in each other's lives. Seeing you guys operate and then start to pick up on trends is the coolest shit for me, man. It is the coolest shit. From the DM perspective, I love the fact that I get to, as a DM, involve myself in every single action that happens in the game. And that's one of the things I dislike as a player is you are essentially taking in everyone else's turn until it's your turn.
Yeah.
Which I don't like thinking that
Yeah.
as just in general, in the whole like forming your thought process while someone's talking, which means you're not really listening to them. I think that similarly applies to my
You know what? I'll
feelings
tell you
about-
what. I think that is what makes me have the hardest time with combat.
Sure.
Is combat is when you're having the most one-on-one time.
Sure.
Whereas when we're doing like character development and everything, I feel like that's when more people all get to interact with each other.
Most definitely, man.
Which like that brings me into like one of my things is like, what is your least favorite part of DMing? And my least favorite part is combat, I think. And I think it's an epiphany that I just had right now listening to you
Sure.
talk about that. It's just that in the combat, it tends to be the person in the dungeon master at that
Yep.
time. Unless we're having fun things where everyone's like playing off of each
Sure.
other. Whereas when we're in like the character development and the planning phases and everything, I like how everybody plays off with each other.
Sure.
And like
It'd
I
be
think
like
that's
the
where
RP.
Yeah, and like where you do a great job, David, I must say, is like you know when to step back as a dungeon master and let the people play off of each other. Like where all of a sudden
Thank you.
Bin has the squirrel buddies as her friends because E is taking a shiny to Bin, and now all of a sudden the squirrel buddies are there.
Cool.
I think is one of like the best parts that happen outside of it. So like from that perspective, like what is one of your favorite and least favorite parts?
Favorite parts are being receiving the information of what a character wants to happen, and then interpreting the dice, and then spitting out a really cool thing. That is probably my favorite thing to do. I love when combat happens and there's an arrow that gets released, and the AC is a 14 and they roll a 16, and then the damage is only 3 on their like they just rolled really low. I love combining those two thought processes that you barely hit this target because it wasn't like a 20 something, you got a 16. So you barely hit this thing and it nicked your arm, and that's why the damage was so low on the dice roll. Making that connection and then driving it home in an illustration is my absolute favorite part.
Ryan, I'm going to ask you this question because you've played with David enough times. Have you picked up on the signals of his "I'm sorry's" yet? Where there's some "I'm sorry's" he really means, and then there's some "I'm sorry's" where he's like, "I'm sorry."
Sure.
I mean all of
but
them.
his I'm sorry's are nothing compared to my laugh.
Oh God!
When I DM, you can tell
Tune
when
in tomorrow night to Ocalian.
You can tell when something bad.
I've heard this one.
Yeah, you can tell when something bad's about to happen because I'll just start going.
Okay, does the laugh happen pre or post dice roll?
Post dice roll,
yeah.
and then it usually comes with "I'm so sorry," and then there's usually a "You crit, didn't you?" And I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
So, and this is a really interesting thing, because we use, what's the name of the interactive thing we've been using?
Tailspire.
So we've been using Tailspire in ours.
Incredible.
Which I gotta say, this is one of my hardest things as a dungeon master that I'm so on the fence about, is the use of like props and minis and all that. Because I'm a very theater of the mind. Like we did the Monster Squad, and that had like the Hydra, so I like the combat parts of the tactical.
Sure.
But the Ocalian Knight, or the Light Up Ocalia one shot on the other end, was the complete opposite. It was all theater of the mind.
Sure.
Funny thing that I loved about the Light Up Ocalia one is there was one bit of combat in there, but an epic story was still told.
Awesome.
So you love the Tailspire. And I guess my feeling on props is like they're really fun in like the combat thing, or like what do you use? What are your feelings on props and minis?
Yeah, I like it, even if it's just conversation. So in typical games when we're not using Tailspire, I have in-person games. I have only DM'd online a couple times, but I have DM'd hundreds of times physical in person. I have a volume 1 and a volume 2 map book. And the maps kind of go together to give you about 120 square foot of space. You don't have to use all 120 feet if you don't want to. You can use them in small squares or in rectangles or the big square. And I will pull those out for freaking conversations because I like the thought process of the players being like, I want to put my mini to the back of that creature for whatever reason, where you could easily do that in theater of the mind, but imagine if you don't see that person.
Yeah.
So that's where having the map and having characters laid out in a tavern scenario. There's not going to be a big battle scene in here. There's not going to be any hidden loot, but you may go to the back of a creature, and now, like as a player, you may not have thought that was an option, and now you're getting a chance to go behind it, wait for him to get into a conversation with somebody, and then sneak up and steal some stuff from him.
There's always the threat then of everything happening around you at the same time.
I'm going to interject real quick.
Yeah,
we've got a question from Gary.
Oh, cool.
Gary.
As Dungeon Masters, what is your opinion on working with your players when it comes to world building and utilizing their character backstories to influence the plot?
Let me touch on this a little bit, and I wanted to bring this up with David. Because when we're doing the Ocalian Knights thing, I think it's a brilliant thing that you did, where I sent you Cricket's backstory But you did something in there where you made me think on my feet, where all of a sudden I was coming over from the Fae, and things I thought we might touch on down the line were all of a sudden central to literally the opening thing.
Thank you.
Which was amazing, and I think we've been able to build off of that. So David, like, so from my experience from that with you, like, what was your decision on that? Because like Cricket had the backstory, came from the Fae, and he was a part of the Whittlers and everything. I'm like, we'll get into this, but David literally kicked off the campaign with that, and like I had to come up with like the Burning Man thing and leading the way and whatnot.
Which was so cool of you.
Which turned out great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing visual and whatnot, and it really is kind of like driving the campaign. But you really put me on the spot with that.
Sure enough, man.
So what was your thought process behind that? You know, with the, like, we're just gonna jump straight into this.
Sure. So I like to think that. So when I design games, I make them for the players I'm playing with. I don't have a general thing that I want to accomplish. That's a book in my head. I take in who they are, and then I build the campaign based on like. I had this guy who he was a rabid folk and a goblin, and as I was thinking about how they might have met or their relationship, that's when we created this plot while they were giving me the descriptions of their characters. Because I don't know, man, I like to take in, if you're gonna mention it, if you're gonna take the time to put it on your character sheet, I want you to get some payoff for that. I got some amazing backstories from every single person in the group, and as I was reading them, I was able to piece together like similar thought processes, and then figure out, okay, how can I get those thought processes to come out in the game? And that's what led me to utilize your backstory. Is we originally talked about Silver Springs and the shores as a group during our session 0, and then I got to read your backstory, and then I knew that I needed to connect those somehow, and I knew you were a dungeon master, so I knew that you would be able to improv this kind of scenery and thought process on what the transition each year would look like going to the Rainbow Festival.
It turned out so good. Ryan,
have
you like worked with characters to develop things, or do you like to?
I've done way worse than that. So I am not one who likes. I like to have a story in mind that I want the players to go along and experience, and then their decisions on it kind of affect it. And what I've done in the past is, for their backstories, I actually linked their backstories to the plot of the story by doing solo sessions with each of the characters and having central characters and NPCs in that solo session that they would then run across, and then the party members would know that linking character that helps them out later on.
Because they had him in the one shot. Sure.
And it was really effective. When I did it, and then like 5 sessions later.
That's really cool. I've never done that before.
Yeah,
that's a really great idea.
That is the best way, especially when the campaign I was trying to run, I was running 2 games at the same time. It was a Civil War plot, and I had both parties on opposite sides of the Civil War
fun.
Dealing with each other.
Wow.
And one of the parties failed out and dropped out. And so it was just one. So then it was like a constant stream of different players. And then eventually, after all the new ones were in, I was like, I got to link them all back up properly.
Sure.
So we went back and did backstories, and I linked them all with this character called Alton, who was this drow general dude who helped them in some way in their backstory, and who was like a mentor-y figure for each of them.
Sure.
Let me tell y'all. So this is something I have the privilege, because my Dungeons and Dragons group, my snack group, has been together for 4 years now. It is an absolute logistical accomplishment that we've been together this long. And it gets. I want to tie it back to the story. These stories are real.
Sure.
Like, these are my best friends. We have had 3 weddings now in our group.
So sick.
That we've all like been at and everything. Like, first Brandon got married, and then Mark got married, and then I got married was the last one. And we've been through COVID together, and we ran Court of the Dragon Queen into all the way through to Rise of Tiamat. Was like 2 or 3 years. I made Dollar Store Tiamat. I believe I've shown you guys pictures of it. We'll put a picture of Dollar Store Tiamat, which I created for the Tiamat finale here.
So dope.
Oh, poor
Make a list of things we owe you, David.
Yeah, thanks, David, of all these things. But what I got to do, like, with my characters is Tiamat, our last Tiamat battle, Brandon's character got to kill Tiamat. And like he like turned into this werewolf bear form that like he came as. So he killed Tiamat. But then like when the smoke cleared, his body was gone.
Ooh.
So we go into our next and like everybody moves on and like whatever happened to Brandon's character was like a mystery. Move into the next campaign, Descent into Averness. Averness happens to be where Tiamat is exiled to. So like way into the campaign, I brought back mirror versions where they met their old characters and had to interact with their old characters and then rescue that character. So like 3 or 4 years worth of characters, we got to like run into each other. Where Chelsea's character, she played one called Cardi Pad Thai, who was like this street up rogue, got to interact with her new character who was like a fallen Aasimar paladin.
Sure.
And just the way that they all got to like revisit their old characters who are now like beefed up to level 15 and do the new ones. And then they would go on to fight Joe Manganiello's character.
Yeah, Archon the Cruel.
They fought Archon the Cruel out front of Archon's tower.
Cool.
And then like also I'm like and then in preparation area, you guys. So like I prepped this whole battle with like hundreds of things. I got Archon stats, I got his guy's stats.
Sure.
They sneak out the back and jump onto their vehicle and dip out. Yeah. So
Bad
that's just
A, man. Bad A.
yeah, unbelievable how you get to interact with people of that.
Yep.
So
But that goes back to, and like this is one of my favorite things, and we're going to kind of touch on 2 things here, which is your Campaign 0. We're doing a Campaign 0 this Thursday in my snack group for the first time in years. I can't wait to create new characters, especially to leave the Averness COVID group behind.
Before you get into the Campaign Zeros, let me give you a question from the audience, which leads into this pretty good. What are your thoughts on how long after starting a new D&D world, homebrewing should start actually running in this world?
I'm gonna leave this one to David because I do not homebrew. We run the books because I am also a lazy dungeon master. I am such a lazy dungeon master. I have a PDF of the Lazy Dungeon Master's Guide that I have not read.
That's awesome. I think that, and great questions. Thank you guys for tuning in. I think that homebrew should be discussed before game actually starts. If you do get a true session 0 where you guys get to build the world together and everybody's putting in their piece of this is where I'm from in this country or continent, and this is what the people are like in my area, and then what we look at for ancient times and how they became that sort of society. If you're able to do that, then I think all of the homebrew stuff should be weaved in there before the game actually starts. Now, if you don't get a true session 0 and there's a little bit of world building built, but not enough where you have a legitimate conversations with every player about what their entire lives were like before they met each other in this game, I think that when certain things arise in game, there should be conversations, very short ones during the game, about how this homebrew thing might work. And then I think you owe the DM or you owe the player an additional conversation to discuss what they want to accomplish and either why that doesn't work for the campaign or how can we maneuver this thing into the world.
So is there a point in there where you have to say, we're going to leave that there and we'll discuss that after the session?
Definitely think that there is, and it's something you got to feel or you got to get and utilize the players in the room who are like, hey, let's move on. Because there's, you get heated. You have your thought processes and
David
you know
and
the
Ryan
player.
discussions.
Exactly.
I actually have 2 thought processes on this. I've got my old one, and then I've got the one I currently have.
I love it.
So originally, when I first started DMing, I was like, yeah, homebrew everything. Let's see what you can do. Then I had a monk do 210 lightning damage in a single attack. And I was like, concern. Maybe.
Emotional damage.
Yeah.
I have questions.
Yeah, it was oh my God. Fuck you, Phil.
That's a giant, that's a purple worm.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
well, that was one hit.
One shot at a purple worm.
So then I went to my philosophy that I had, and this is the first one that you can do, is I didn't allow homebrew unless I had thoroughly looked over it and was like, yeah, that seems balanceable and fine, and it doesn't completely break the game. And then I came into the philosophy that I currently use, which is, no matter what you do, I can deal with it. If you want to do 210 damage, man, that lightning bolt's gonna backfire on you.
Things happen behind the DM screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
we know about those things.
So when it comes to homebrew, so are you talking about like homebrewing content, homebrewing magic items, homebrewing abilities?
So
like, where do you kind of draw the line? Because like I'm especially not into like, well, I'm not really into homebrew at all.
Sure.
Like we run the books, and like I come up with an idea every week what we're gonna do. You know, between Little Debbie snacks.
Sure.
Is like kind of like my attitude towards
I
things.
love homebrewing.
Okay.
I found a lot of things that are really stupid and that I don't like, so I like to fix them. Like, for example, my most homebrew thing that I put in everything is the UA feats for skills, which I absolutely love because no one will ever pick them as a feat. They're a cool way to distinguish your character by giving them something that they're good at. And they're just really useful. And that came from I used to give all my players a feat at level 1 until I learned about
Every
human
single
variant.
one. Yep.
And someone came in with a human variant with 2 feats at level 1. I was like,
ooh, this
hold
doesn't
up.
seem right.
Yeah, so
You're like game breaking.
Yeah.
Because there's homebrew and there's flavor and then there's game breaking, which brings us back to like the min maxers.
Yeah.
And the play to win players and
Sure
everything. So is that like Ryan? So you do your research on that where you're
Yeah,
just like, can't allow that. That's gonna break the game.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. And then because like all of my monsters are homebrewed. I make all of my monsters up because I find 5e monsters really boring because they're usually just an attack and maybe an ability that can come into effect.
Sure.
I like to make it so that each monster is a different fight. They have different abilities and they do different things each time. Like, one of my players know that one of my most common things to say is I fucking hate dragons in Dungeons & Dragons. I think they're the worst element of Dungeons & Dragons because they're all identical except for their breath weapon damage. And so I used to use Monster Hunters, custom monsters that some people have made, and I absolutely love them. And I've taken their abilities multiple times for different monsters that I've made, and they make fights way more interesting.
Sure.
Because they're unique, they're different, and they make you think about how you have to interact with combat. And now, as David can tell you, giving monsters custom abilities doesn't always work out perfectly.
I am so fired up for Ryan's game tomorrow night. And I feel like not to toot my own horn here, but honey, if you're watching at home, we made the right decision. Because I can't wait. I cannot wait to see what you're going to do to these guys tomorrow. And then that way I can prepare for it when I am sitting across you from you at the table.
But I mean, a good example of like the homebrewing that I've done is Chromoisi's class was a homebrew class that I had made because I'm not typically too big of a fan of the spell slots. So I created a homebrew class that had a mana-like system where you generated spell points that you could use, almost like the sorcerers, yada yada, and then you could use special abilities with them. And it's complicated. If I explained it, it wouldn't be.
It's still complicated.
But it is complicated. But it's a fairly balanced class. I mean, it's more. You can think of it like a warlock, where it's like super burn, and then there's like a slow build up.
As we found out with Chromoisi, where he was like stumbling at the end and like barely following. So
Gabby clarified on the question about the question, asking when do you think your world building is at a point where this world is now ready to be played?
Oh,
that was the question.
As in, like you're building the world?
Yeah, like so. David, you're building Ocalian.
Yep. So right now, I could produce enough physical content that someone could play in the shores, they could play in Silver Springs, they could play in the villages, they could play in Dunellen, they could play in Bellevue, and then there's an area of the forest, which is towards the center of Ocalia, that they would be able to play in. And that's basically running it the way a book would, where you have a breakdown of the scenery of what you're looking at when you look in this town, and then who you might meet, and what missions those people who you meet might send you on. And then as a DM, that might be enough information for you to take off in that town.
Do you have like some mentally pre-populated NPCs and like some character or some encounters that they can have there, and even some combat if they need
Absolutely.
to do? I have you got like a spice rack.
Yes,
You
very
got
much
the dish,
so.
you got the dish,
Very
and you
much
got a
so.
couple of spices sitting there,
Yep.
and it's just a matter of how your characters are going to do
Yep.
before they're there.
100%. Are they going to go to the tavern? Are they going to go to the church? And
The way I would start it is you got to have a major city,
Sure.
which is where I would say you want to start your players off in.
Mhm.
Then you need to have a wild kind of area. It doesn't matter what it is, forest, desert, swamp, whatever. Just a place where there's adventure to be had. And then there needs to be a small town. That gives you enough populace and enough things to do. That gives you time, at least 2 to 3 months worth of content, easy content too,
Mhm.
that you could go around and build out the rest of your world. But as long as you have that much ready, you're pretty much good to start.
All right, let me give you the lazy dungeon master perspective on
I
this.
love it.
Okay, so like in my mind, you're like, all right, or like, so in my thing, I'm like, I have the hits that I want them to get to.
Yep.
Whether the hit is going to happen at the church, in the market, or on the street, the hit becomes wherever they end
Sure.
up. How they get there and everything is just like, you know, their own ways. But I'm like in my mind, from a lazy dungeon master's perspective, is they have to get to the portal to get me to the next scene.
Sure.
Whether the portal is at the church, whether
Sure.
it's been conjured by a mage or whatever happens. And like you said, like you have like the shores and everything. In my mind, I'm like, the shores in that map is whichever, like, you could choose from Ocala, Bellevue, and the shores.
Yep.
But whichever one you end up with is the map that I'm bringing out.
Sure,
you know what I
Oh
mean?
no, I totally understand that. That's so there are games that are like faux sandboxes. What's the name? Did they Uncharted?
Mm-hmm.
Uncharted is probably one of the best examples I could give, where the world that you're living in Uncharted as you're playing looks and feels so open.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so very open, but you can only go one way. It is essentially a side scroller.
Uh-huh.
You can only go one way. It looks like that alleyway is going to get you where it's going, but it doesn't. You're going to have to loop back around and climb no matter what. And I think that is Uncharted is still a freaking fantastic game, but I like the games to be more Skyrim-esque, where it really is a free open world and stuff is set off based on the area you're in when you're there.
Well, hold on. There's a distinction that needs to be made here.
Sure.
With there's a caveat to what you just said.
Sure.
Right. Do not do a massive free open world if you're a first-time DM.
Very true.
Pick up the book.
Very true.
You need to have structure, and you need to know what's going to happen in the world. Don't try to go out and make everything ready and
You
available.
won't ever start.
You'll never start.
Yep.
It'll ruin your experience DMing.
I
Make
am a dungeon
simple
master.
plots.
Lazy dungeon master is telling you less is more. What you want to do is pick up a dice. Like I will play. If you're a stranger that has never played Dungeons and Dragons before in your life, come sit at the table with me, and I will play right now with a D20. It's all you need.
Yep, legit.
And because I read a really good article where Dungeons and Dragons has 3 parts. You set the scene, they make a decision, and the consequences of the scene, and you roll through those 3 things the entire time you play Dungeons and Dragons.
it.
Here's what's happening, how you going to deal with it, roll the dice, and everything else is just those series of 3 things. If you're going to pick up the book for Wildemont and try to play within the Critical Role world, you don't need to do that, especially if you're just starting. You and your buddies need to get together and play one scene, and that's all you need to do. Because like Brian was just saying, you will never get started then if you try to do that much.
The best thing for a new time DM is just realizing that your players are going to have fun no matter what you do. As long as you're not overbearing and you allow them to do some stuff within reason, they will have a good time. Good example is my buddy Nick, who had been playing with me for a year and was suffering through me the entire time. And he decided to start DMing when we started this so that I didn't have to run that game anymore. And he was astounded at how well he did in the first session. And I was like, no, my man, you did fantastic. Because he had to have me in his first session as a solo session. And my God, the stress level he had when I bypassed everything that he had set up and was in the area that I was not supposed to be in was priceless. And he was like, why would you do that? I was like, no, you handled it perfectly.
It is, and I think that's going to segue me into another thing that I wanted to bring up, and it's a primary point, which is one of my favorite things like that. Me and my wife get to share this now because we have these extra adventures that we're on.
Sure.
And I think it's something that the world needs to, that's happening in the world right now that doesn't get enough attention.
Sure.
Which is the primary thing about Dungeons and Dragons, and why my snack group has been together for 4 years, is at its core, Dungeons and Dragons is a non-digital experience. Even though we're having these talks on Twitch and we stream and everything, Dungeons and Dragons, and why I think it is getting the hype that it's getting right now, and it will get even bigger here as we start to come out of the post-COVID world, is it's you and 5 of your buddies sitting around a table telling stories.
Yep.
Darian and I were just camping over the weekend, and we were on a digital detox, and the best part about it is we sat around the campfire with 10 of our friends, and we told stories.
Love it.
And I think that's why Dungeons and Dragons, there's the accessibility of 5e, but also and like we said, these are real stories that we all told together, but it's still, you sit down and you sit around a table with your friends and you have a non-digital, analog, personal experience with your friends. And David, I think, with all the technology that we deal with in the world, if you kind of get that same vibe about a lot.
Totally.
Thaliandor, another great experience. Why Thaliandor I think is so popular, and why you guys have 30 people out there hitting each other with wacky bats, is it is an analog, non-digital experience.
Oh, totally.
Now I have to defend my platform of choice as a digital DM.
Ryan lived in his room for 7 years.
Okay, well, you know what? Perfect, Ryan. I want you to speak on
Overexaggeration.
it. But even still, so there's I don't want to take away from that experience, but
I like I've said multiple times, I would not be here right now in this room having this conversation if I did not play online D&D and interacted with people digitally and formed those connections digitally. Those interactions are so valid. Like I said, I made a man cry across the United States.
So all that was all on.
That is all online.
Oh, that's all digital. I am so excited to get your perspective on that. Then.
Realize I did not. I had played 2 in-person sessions before I played with David, and I was so hesitant on playing with David because I hated playing in person so much.
Wow, really?
Because my first 2 sessions I'd ever played in person were so horrible that I never wanted to do it again.
Did you have a DM tyrant, or what was it?
I wouldn't say DM tyrant, but a
because they're local and they watch us.
No, I'll call you out. Austin of Vibranium Comics.
Oh, God. Where's the gauntlet?
You fucked me so hard. Not that I didn't deserve it. I'm just saying, you let him push me off a cliff, dog.
The experiences are real.
And then
still heard about
tonight's
it.
backdrop brought to you by Vibranium Comics. Thanks, Austin, for the great backdrop here.
Then the other one I had was I joined a D&D college group, and first minute of gameplay, the rest of the party was level 7. I was level 3.
Ew.
The DM allowed me to have 1 magic item, and one of the level 7 players stole the item from me. Took it from me.
Oh, see, and that just goes. It's it brings a round table into the DM setting a.
Yep.
So yeah. So then you go into the digital space.
Yep.
And then so what was it like? So the experiences were still real in the digital space. You were able to connect.
I've run so many games digitally. And I won't deny that some were awful. I had some of the weirdest motherfuckers in my game.
So where did you get these people from? From a forum?
Roll20?
Reddit.
Oh, Reddit and Roll20.
David laughing in the background.
Oh, Lordy.
What is it? RPG Group Finder or something on Reddit is where I would get people. And I had interviewed over 200 people.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. 200 people I had interviewed throughout my time gathering players for the game. And I had kicked probably about 7 people out of my games.
Wow.
Because they had either weirded out my other players, were not compatible, or they had outright angered me.
Really?
Two horror stories that I can tell are the guy who came in who specifically, oh my god, he creeped everyone out. He was awful. He played a 16-year-old priestess cleric, and he specified in-game that it was her birthday and a bunch of really other inappropriate things that everyone was like,
No.
And then the other one was an artificer something else. Oh, an artificer cleric who decided that he was going to have a metal spider cat construct that would follow him around, and he dropped out halfway through the session, didn't talk anymore, and he had creeped everyone else out with his spider cat thing that he posted in the chat.
Dope.
That we were just like,
Oh, I love
no,
that.
no,
Ding, ding,
you're
ding,
gone.
ding, 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 ding.
Wow.
That's it running around.
So you've had the
Ding, ding,
digital
ding, ding, ding,
experience.
ding.
So then, so you have the in-person experience with David, and now we're all having this here.
Mm-hmm.
So going from the digital to like the analog experience, which my point is that like I think like one of the great things about it is the in-person experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's been your feelings on that, and like moving into the analog space then?
So, analog is really difficult for someone who is extremely social inept, and really difficult for people who just do not come out like easily.
Yeah.
Like, it was super difficult to try and do that stuff. Luckily, I had been forcing myself to do it more often. Like, David can tell you, the first 3 or 4 sessions that I played with him, I was very much so like, just completely back. And I would only talk to him when it would come into breaks. I would immediately, like, I still do it now. I'll immediately just go hang out with David whenever we go on break.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until it was just me and Loper come on, Mike,
sure.
that when it was like an absolute
good
tiny
game.
group that we were very close, that I was able to really enjoy it.
So you've been able to have that like social like bonding experience like in that space.
Yeah.
David, which incredible, it ties into so well with so many of the things that you've said about, you know, Ryan in your interviews and everything. David, having had that experience with Ryan now, have there been other players like, because you have your theater background.
Sure.
You are obviously an outgoing person and are just like, you are like how we met you in the thing. You somehow managed to like vacuum the attention in the room.
Oh, thanks,
just in
man.
the way that you present,
Sure.
and you're very welcoming and everything. Have you had that kind of experience with players where you've actually managed to like break them out of their shell or get them into more of like the RPG aspect?
Oh, most definitely, man. I've been lucky enough to have. I mean, like when Ryan tells his story about doing online DMing or online Dungeons and Dragons, and then venturing over into my game, which he was hesitant to coming over into in the first place, and then to hear how he had not literally been to hang out with people who were not online in years, and then to have him here now running this studio the way that he is, and that even if a piece of that is because of me, that is some of the biggest wins you could ever have as a person, man. And I've been lucky enough to have that happen on multiple occasions where people who they walk into bearded brown coats on a Saturday without anybody or any direction. They just know they needed to be in this building today for some reason. And then they make eye contact with me across the room, and I see them kind of standing over there, and I just, hey guys, give me 1 second, and go over and introduce myself and say, hey, I noticed you go watching a D&D. I would love to get you in today's game if you want to.
Man.
And then seeing them come back the next week, and now their parents are with them because they told their parents about me, and they wanted to come introduce themselves, and to have the opportunity to DM for special needs kids, and then have them develop these characters and go through these emotions right then. I mean, it's freaking cool, man.
Man,
It's
that
very,
is
very cool,
something
man.
else, dude.
Yeah.
Especially like, you know, you bring up families because it's like so family friendly these days.
Hell yeah.
And then so your kids are involved?
Oh,
in Dungeons and
absolutely.
Dragons?
My 13-year-old, and actually, I needed to mention this, and this needs to be on camera. David, you'll probably clip this out at some point. So I write with my daughters. When I'm sitting at the table and I'm writing for the adventure of the day, I'll throw out, hey, Kaylin, what's a really good idea for a monster that you might find in a cave? And she'll just start rattling off some things from her background in the different shows she watches, and we'll develop a really cool thing together. And then I'll put it I'll put that into the computer, and we'll make the best of what it matches in the D&D world. My 6-year-old actually
Welcome to the
gave
chat, Sully.
me. Hey, Sully.
Oh, Sully here. Hi, Sully.
The dream sequence that we did on our last Ocalian Nights adventure, our last episode, I had that idea, and I was like, this is going to be really freaking cool. And that was one of those moments when you know that you're doing a good job as a DM, when I was doing those dream sequences for you guys and seeing how you guys were freaking out and really living in those moments. It's freaking magical. But my daughter is the person who came up with Nico's backstory, or Nico's dream sequence. I'm telling her about the different dream sequences because I think they're really cool. And the 6-year-old is like, she's 7 now. She's listening to me. And then she's like, isn't there another guy? You haven't said his dream yet. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to do for Nico just yet. And she was like, so what is he like? So I start explaining like he's a warrior. He fights for his kingdom. And he's got this king he really loves. And she was like, do the horde. And I'm like, what the heck is do the horde? And she's like, do the horde, Dad. Look, you have him staring out at an army, and behind him is his army. And then right before he wakes up, he turns around and it's the bad army. And like that, because he wants to fight for his country so bad, wouldn't a nightmare be if his country didn't want him? And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? That is beyond gold.
There's your 6-year-old daughter.
My 7-year-old freaking daughter, Coraline Dean Lugo, came up with that idea, dude, on the spot within minutes of me explaining Nico's character. She is actually the only one of my kids who's run a D&D session before. My 13-year-old's not quite confident enough to do it, or maybe she is confident enough to do it and just hasn't yet. But the 7-year-old ran a D&D adventure. She took my maps out, she picked some creatures that she wanted to have me fight, and then she came up with why I was there and ran a D&D session.
So there was a question in chat, and it was, how do you vet people for D&D games? So this was probably for me.
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Before we go there, real quick, my wife is still waiting for a table at the snack game, a chair at the snack game.
Wait, what?
My wife is not playing in the snack game yet because a chair has not opened up for her. And we have been married almost a year now. We've been dating for over 2 years, but there's not been a chair for her.
So you'll speak on the in-person vetting of players after you do the online version.
So
because I don't have a vetting process. You're welcome at my table.
So some key things to note when vetting players, especially online ones. So there's some things you look out for typically.
True.
So like play style, I usually ask the players who I'm interviewing. I usually pull them into a Discord call and I talk to them, and we go through like what their past games have been, what kind of characters they've played, what's their play style, is it combat heavy, RP heavy, etc., etc. And I try to figure out whether or not I mesh with them well enough as a DM, and kind of make a decision off of that. If I feel comfortable with them enough, I'll usually let them go to the making a character part, and from the character, this is usually where people will lose, is they'll make a character, and I can tell what kind of player they are based off of the character they make.
Oh, I would love.
I've removed
do you have
so
any
many characters.
Do you have like any archives of like applications that you've gotten where you've gotten to the character part and you're just like, ooh, red flags?
Oh my god, I probably do in my Discord chat. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
All right, we will have
Pull them out.
We'll have some discussions with Ryan about like some classics you've gotten.
Yeah, there are some there that are definitely really bad. And I'll like, usually one of the things that immediately turns me off from a player as a prospective prospect is if they say they want a multi-class. That's one of the things that immediately makes me go, you're trying to power game.
Yeah.
Like super hard, especially if they bring up cleric and artificer.
Sure.
Or cleric paladin or something along those lines. I'm like, the only thing you want to do is power game.
Guess what I'm playing in our adventure tomorrow? A cleric paladin.
It's all right. I know you as a person.
With a little bit of monk.
Another thing I look out for is I have such sensitive ears that in online games, I can't stand anyone having a poor mic or background noise. So if I hear that in the voice chat interview, I immediately apologize to them because I can't let them in.
Sure.
I also never let in people who have accents, and it's nothing against them having an accent. It's if I can't understand you and you slow down my pace,
it's going to muddle up the game, sure.
I'm like, I can't. I'm so sorry. I also look for things that involve like fetishes or kinks because I don't want my players to be weirded out. The ones who have earned their right at the table.
Process.
Exactly. And if we have time before game, I'd usually let them come and talk to the party.
Sure.
And then I have the party. I message the party individually. And I'm like, do you want to play with this person? Are they cool or not? And they will usually say yes or no.
Sure.
And sometimes I still fail because people can make it through that process through acting, but then their actions...
couple hours in, sure.
The first session of one of my games, I killed a player. He made a character immediately afterwards. It was literally the first attack, the first action of the first combat. One-shot him.
Wow.
I nat 20'd, insta-killed his character.
Whoops.
Came back.
They're still squishy 1 through 3.
Yeah.
Came back with a second character. It was just a twin of his new one. I was like, okay, that's fine. Killed him immediately. First attack on him. Came back with a third one after we had finished the arena like tutorial of how to do the thing, and he made some of the weirdest decisions that were so. His character then his third character then died. Also, it got teleported to a place that was called Death Island. It was a random encounter that he could roll. It was a 1d100, and he rolled it. And he teleported to Death Island and decided to play with some of the buildings that I warned him not to, and got struck by lightning and died. And then I asked the rest of the party.
3 character deaths in one session?
3 character deaths in one session.
Ooh.
I think it kind of brings us back to campaign 0, and it's a touchy subject. So anyway, so we have campaign 0 this Thursday. Darian's gonna get on this game. It's just that she hasn't been. Averness and COVID went on that long that like we never had the opportunity to like work her in, and now finally she's gonna like be able to come in on Thursday. Yay, good times. And this is like something I just want to touch on very briefly because this is a Dungeon Masters discussion, which tends to happen at campaign 0, and it's something that I think that Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons has done a really good job on and explaining is setting boundaries for your game, which David, your campaign 0 was awesome.
Thanks, man.
And like how we just like talked about like all those rules and everything. Because there's a dungeon master out there that heavily influenced my style, and something got into like sexual content, and like he did something bad, and he's like not used anymore. So like my number one boundary is always just like no sexual content.
Sure.
There's no reason for it in the Dungeons and Dragons world. PG-13, besides us accidentally like yelling profanities because that's how we talk, and we apologize to Sully's dad every time. That's just like one of my big boundaries is like. No, there's no reason for any type of like sexual content at all. And then, so David, you gave us the campaign 0, which is where we went over a couple of the rules. And is that like some of the like more important things when you can start a game?
Legitimate is there's a good checklist that I got from online. I actually got it through Critical Role, one of their channels. So they had it in the very bottom. It's like, this is a really good checklist to go through with your party. And just reading through it has allowed me to understand what problems could potentially arise, and not talking about them is a little irresponsible, because coming into a role-playing game, like when I play Skyrim, like I steal and I kill as many people as I can. I don't believe in that in the real world. I would never do that in the real world, but that's what the game is there for on occasion. You play Grand Theft Auto to be a criminal.
Yeah.
So I think that this is going to sound strange.
You clearly didn't grow up with me and my cousin. We wanted longer turns, so we followed the road rules. So,
sure.
So we had one life each.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand that.
Fuck you, Taylor.
I totally understand that.
Controller hog.
But I think that there is a world where Dungeons & Dragons can be used for some explicit content. Where in the real world, you would never have this thought, but this necromancy character that you've built and has a backstory and a issue with blanket blank, there's no reason why you can't experiment with what that looks like in a D&D game. So an issue that I have in games in the past is not vetting a player and just working them into the ongoing campaign. And that's ruined some groups where we started out with a group of 6, grew to 7, grew to 8, grew to 9, and now 2 of the players dropped off, so now it's at 7, but the majority is now new players versus the original 6 that were there, because I think Dungeons & Dragons is such a unique activity, and not everybody is doing it well, that I just didn't want to ever turn anybody away.
Yeah, and give them the opportunity to play, which is the biggest, I think we all know, the biggest boss in all of Dungeons & Dragons, scheduling.
Big facts.
Which, I mean, luckily enough, we have the group chat, and like, with tech these days, we have the group chat on Facebook now, which I love how much more and like closer we are as friends because of the group chat. We always check in, and like my group chat for my snack group is like part of the things, but a lot of it is just because it's just like trying to coordinate schedules. And I'll tell you, if I were to give you advice on scheduling a Dungeons and Dragons game, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, no. People lead lives.
Sure.
If you can pull off a game on, like, we have Tuesdays scheduled now. If, like, my snack group game is on Thursday night, like, a weeknight is very more reasonable than a Friday night or Saturday night, or Sunday was my original game. and Sundays just way out because there's too many other things that tend
Sure.
to come up on the weekends,
Yep.
especially with Darian and mine's life.
I use Monday and Thursday where mine were for my 2 games a week.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And like if you can steady schedule that so people know, like when the thing came up with Nico, where Nico was like, "Hey, I got this happening on Tuesdays now," and like it's kind of hard to say it sometimes, but it's like, "Hey, man, we gotta like keep a steady schedule." Because if we try to start getting wacky on it, especially like Darian has like a strange. As soon as you start getting wacky on it, it's just that's where things will fall apart. And as a person that's running a game for 4 years now, I think it's been the consistency of what night we play that has managed to keep it together as long as we have.
Consistency is key. You got to get people into a habit of doing it over and over and over again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the big concern with Nico coming back, and that's why, David, you have to say, or you have to get better at letting people naturally leave stories.
Sure.
Because as much as we love having Nico, and as much as Nico loves being on,
Sure.
it's now a strain on Nico and Marcy to have him come.
No, man, I totally understand that. I think that it was not my intention for his character to ingrain himself heavily into the party.
Oh, we love Nico now.
And so and then having that awesome background of Thalyandor, it allows me to help to flavor Ocalia with that much more depth. Because we have this background. So I think it just 2 kind of happy accidents forced him into the game.
Let me ask you that. Is that a lesson that you're learning now as a dungeon master who's running a more long-term campaign? Sure. Is that one of the vets that you have to do? It's like, okay, I'm going to bring you in for this arc and I'm going to play you this amount of time.
Yep.
And then so Darren and I are going to Ireland in March. We will have to let you know, hey, in 3 sessions, we're not going to be here for 2 sessions.
Sure.
Start planning accordingly.
Absolutely, man. And that really helped with Chris. Chris told me he wasn't going to make it back to the next session. Mm-hmm. So that gave me the ability to think about where his character might go, and then potentially for us to do a one-shot with what that looked like with Chris. Nico, it just happened to dive so much into where we were already headed, and having his combat prowess is a benefit at the moment with you guys having such
a little bit.
legitimately.
Also wacky bats.
Yeah.
My God,
Also wacky
I enjoy
bats.
doing wacky bats before
So much fun.
before we play.
Well, I believe we will have a Sir Nicholas one-shot now.
Sir Nicholas one shot?
Yes, I think y'all were talking about.
Oh, doing a Thalyandor.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
All right, so there's
Sir
gonna be a
Nicholas.
Sir
I was
Nicholas
like, who's
one
Sir
shot.
Nicholas? Oh, yeah, tracking. So stay tuned. It'll happen where we discuss Nico and where he went during his dream. Because if you didn't notice during the last adventure, or maybe the second to last adventure, Nico went through a little bit of changes while he slept at night. So that's really interesting to figure out what happened there.
Stay tuned for that. And stay tuned for Ryan Cox's... Ryan Mays. I'm sorry.
You buggered that up so bad.
I don't have a voice for announcing. I'm sorry. Stay tuned for Ryan Mace's one-shot tomorrow. The Deathly Hallows of His Mind.
Yeah.
So I think we're almost at a good wrap-up area, guys.
Sure.
And let me ask you, and I'll start with you first, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
If you had your dream table or your dream game, what would it be? Would it be players playing or a format? Like you have like infinite time to put this together, infinite resources and infinite talent. What would it be? I mean, that's kind of like asking for a lot, but like a game you, like in your mind, you'd really want to run and you can go infinite with it. You go big, go small. Just what would you like to do? Like what kind of game?
I'm such a big storyteller
Mm-hmm.
that I would probably plan out some very large, grand, epic scale level 1 through 20 adventure where the characters go through multiple arcs and every level is maybe focused on a different character, or maybe a couple levels is focused on a different character's like backstory, which is how I kind of like it. It would probably be a party of 6, and each area would kind of focus more on that character and their backstory. I don't think I'd want to run it as much as I am a control freak about it. I would want to participate in it too much.
I never thought of that. Whether you'd want to be a player or a DM.
I will say I do get super control-y, and I look at David sometimes like, God damn it, shut up, Ryan, shut up. You're not control here. Let him do what he's gonna do.
That's so fun.
I'm a narcissist in the way where it's like if I had like multiple of me, I could be happy.
Hell yeah. Sure. It's like me and 4 other Ryans.
Yeah. All running the game on different characters. David,
awesome.
your dream table. Ryan, anybody in particular playing it, or just like a good, solid, experienced group? I think we already answered that. Stop 5
Yep.
Ryans.
Ryan, yeah,
And
that's
Ryan,
his dream.
Ryan
That's his dream.
DMing
So,
in 5
so,
Ryans.
so very combat and role play heavy.
Uh-huh.
People who are very invested in their characters and who know how to do combats, because I need quick combat for my poor brain.
Uh-huh.
And I need people who are tactical thinkers and who think about what their team can provide to them, which is terrible because I'm an awful team player in most games.
Tactics and everything too.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
David, your dream table, would it be player? Like, what would your dream game be?
Sure. I'm gonna split it off into two. I have my most fun, and then the one that I think that you have to mention because it's a passion. I would love to run consistent youth Dungeons and Dragons games.
Oh, man.
Where I come up with a really solid adventure and then play that adventure with tons of different groups of youth players, and then either compile that footage into like instructional videos on how people think and the way that confidence can be built in a person. So that's like my passion one. That's the one that if I could do the best good with D&D, that's my choice. But like my fun, I get to get a 20 on my perfect game. I want to do a stadium game where we are we have a full live audience in front of us. We're in the middle of a stage, and we are doing an epic one shot with me as the dungeon master for a stadium of people.
Wow.
That is a bucket list. It's my end goal. I think that would be an incredible feeling. Being on stage as an actor, having that, I don't know, the applause and being able to kind of play conductor with emotions and getting the laughs and the ahs.
So are you saying Ocalian Quest?
Yeah, exactly.
One day, the first thing will happen, our first one will be live at the Riley.
100%.
And we'll start off in the black box of the Riley and work our way up from
Hell yeah.
from there.
And then we'll make it to the theater.
I happen to know the people that run the Riley, so
Ooh.
we will work that. Matt Wardell, Pam Calero Wardell, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I brought them dice, and we're coming for you. Just to let you know.
I'm telling you, look at YouTube and look how many views some of these live games can acquire, and the amount of donations you can get from an event like that. It's kind of sick, man. You could really help an organization out.
Speaking of,
I've shot so many things in the Riley Art Center.
Sure.
Speaking of donations, tying this over to my dream one. Well, my fun one now is something we might get to see here in Ocalia. We found online, I was reading the Art of Dungeons and Dragons, and we found this mega dungeon.
Oh no.
This mega dungeon, and all of a sudden, like, speaking of the group chat, we're just like spitballing in the group chat, and all of a sudden me and David are like 12 characters, 2 dungeon masters, 24 hours, 3 levels of hell. And
we met our sub goal.
Oh, yay!
No way!
Thank you, Demon Transama, who helped
No
us reach
way.
10 subs.
Yay!
Thank you.
Demon Transama.
That's big. I really appreciate that. That's awesome.
That's one we might do because I love that idea and
Shit,
us
me
being
too,
like
man.
the crazy people because this dungeon map is batshit
It's
insane.
bonkers, dude.
Bonkers.
Absolutely bonkers.
And
I
how
looked
we're
at it
gonna
for a
do
second, had to look away.
Yeah, because it's just
My ADHD, man.
Ryan would not have slept for
Yeah,
days if
yeah.
he looked anymore at that map.
it's like old. Well, it was like a 2E dungeon, like
Yep.
I think drawn by guy. I don't know. It's nuts, and we're like, man, we're gonna turn it.
Oh
into
no,
a
it has
grinder.
traps, doesn't it?
Oh,
totally.
yeah.
I
Oh,
hate
totally.
traps so
And like
much.
it was so funny. 'cause
Undermount. It's undermount.
it's this
Undermount
gigantic
level 1, 2, and 3.
It's this gigantic map, and then you look at it, and it's like level 2. You're like, this is one level.
Yeah.
So we might come up with that like further down the line and make like an epic like fundraiser.
Legit
out of that or
24-hour stream.
24 hours.
I'm
Couple
taking
dungeon masters,
Tunnel
people
Fighter
rotating out.
3 times.
The best part we think about it is we'll just meet grind characters
Yep.
or re-rotate, but it's one of our big schemes we have to do. My other one, I don't know if y'all have seen the acting troupe out of Orlando called Phantasmagoria.
Yeah.
They are a gothic.
I know several of those
Do you know
actors.
this Phantasm?
Absolutely.
It is my dream to dungeon master a Phantasmagoria table.
Oh, no way.
Think about it. I've seen them like 5 or 6 times, and I was like, I imagine getting 5 of them in full character and full garb and DMing a game for them.
Bill, I'm gonna need a conversation. Now, do you want a Phantasmagoria style game or DMing for the
I will
Phantasmagoria?
DM for the troop.
Okay, beautiful.
And if they could do it in character,
Yeah.
where I will do some. My idea is you've seen Phantasmagoria.
Sure.
Like the whole point of the one shot that we do is that the story could not be finished.
Ooh, Bill, can we make this happen, Bill? I'm gonna message you this exact conversation
Bro,
and make it
wow,
happen, man.
you really know him?
Oh,
Like,
without a doubt. I've worked with him at Sleuth's Mystery Dinner Theater. Bill, I'm blanking on his last name, like Warner. Bill Warner. Holy crap. William Warner, Bill Warner. He is a combat director, so he does stage fighting. He has been on the biggest stages you can imagine in the stage combat world of teaching people and choreographing fights. And he will get up in the middle of a play he's watching that is using bad form or like improper technique that will hurt people, and he will stop them. He will stop the whole fucking production, and he'd be like, "This is unsafe. You guys need to stop." Like while they're fucking doing it,
No
he's this
shit,
serious
huh?
about his
Wow.
his thing.
Fucked.
Nah, bro, and he'll tell them why. He'll tell them how they're doing it wrong. Give them a scenario as to where it's happened here locally. You can look at it. Incredibly knowledgeable guy, and he is one of the cast members. Could be even one of the founding members.
Wow. Well, I
so
would love
Bill
to DM
Warner.
for Phantasmagoria. If you can
Cool.
get us 5 Phantasmagoria actors.
I will see as soon as we're done here. I'll message him.
Awesome, dude. Because that is is something I came up with the other day. I was
Sure.
like, I would love to pull that off as like a cross Ocalian Nights
Gorgeous.
and an amazing local acting troupe. Me and Darian have seen him like 5 or 6
We get
times.
to play wacky bats with him, right?
Maybe. Oh, he would probably love to come out, but he'd be super mad at everybody.
Well, there we go. All right, we'll leave that there. Ryan Mace, final thoughts?
Oh man, I'm just having a good time.
And I cannot wait to see your one shot.
I'm
tomorrow.
gonna-
One last question from the chat, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
last question we're going to take. When is the Ocalian Nights musical coming?
Oh,
Musical episodes happening just after February. So the group needs to get through the forest for the musical episode to happen. Let's just throw that there.
Darian is somewhere watching, and she just lit up.
look, I'm just waiting for the right
We'll
songwriter
collab.
to properly do the Ocalian Nights theme song that I have in my head, because I can't get the melody out. But it sounds really good. It hit me in the head when I
sure.
got smacked in the face by a weight bar. But it's really good. So that could be
Guess who gets
thing.
to listen to the months of rehearsals as his wife figures all this out? It's this guy. Baby, I love you.
Fantastic.
David Lugo.
Last thoughts. I absolutely love being a dungeon master. It has been a shining spot on my entire life. I think that if you are curious about Dungeons and Dragons, you should hop in as fast as you can. You can start off by doing some YouTube, doing some Google searches, finding a group at your local comic book shop, and just jumping in and getting started. The things you can do in Dungeons and Dragons are worth all of the effort to figure out how to play. If you are local and you want to get into an Ocalian Nights game, message us in the comments, and we would love to get you out and into a game at some point in the future. We definitely plan on having more guest spots, and we would love to have you at our table.
And I must say, gentlemen, this has been an absolute dream discussion for me. I've enjoyed this so much. It's a conversation I've been wanting to have for years, especially to run into other dungeon masters.
Sure.
For me, being a dungeon master, like I said when we talked about the non-digital experiences, Ocalian Nights, you're always going to be my side piece. I'm
Sure,
sorry.
I understand that.
My primary group is, like my snack group, are some of my best friends in the world. We've been through weddings and everything. We've been through weddings. We've been through a global pandemic now together. We've watched all these movies. We're some of the best friends, and it's that bond that was created around sitting around a table.
Sure.
Just like we have now, sitting around telling stories, and like we were doing at the campfire over the weekend. So if you get an opportunity, even if you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons with your friends, sit around a table with somebody and tell some stories, and that's really the core of what Dungeons and Dragons is about.
On the bright side, I can't hurt you if you're not here tomorrow.
And tomorrow night, Ryan Mace's One Shot, which we have luckily decided to take off for. Tune in, 7 p.m., twitch.tv/Ocalian Nights. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and for watching on YouTube and in the future.
TPK, 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 TPK.